Hello, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond. My name is Taylor, and welcome to Sorcerous, a small little indie turn-based RPG provided to me by the developer and publisher Sirenium Studios through Keymailer. So yes, I did receive this product for free. It is available on Steam for about $10 US or your regional equivalent. I will have that linked in the description down below. Now, with that being said, even though I was provided a free key by the devs, I will not let that affect or change my opinions on the game. I want to make this very clear. I am going to say some positive things and some negative things about this game. I do not believe it is by any means a bad game. I do believe, however, it is not the right type of game for me. This is a classic style JRPG recreated by the studio, and honestly, it's just not my cup of tea. Now, growing up as a kid, I primarily had an Xbox or a 360, so that kind of limited the exposure that I had to JRPGs, though I did have some friends with PlayStations. So I've played, Final Fantasy. I've played some of them. Not a lot of them, but a few of the classic JRPGs in the style. The most notable of which I actually owned was Blue Dragon. I think it was 3 or 4 disc, 3D kind of turn-based RPG where you used blue shadows. I vividly remember this game. So I do have little bits of experience here and there, as well as just some experience with some more modernized JRPGs. And it didn't feel as good as some of those. However, I completely understand this is an indie project, and as far as I can tell, this is the first project from Sirenium Studios, which I think is awesome. And I think I've been pronouncing it wrong. I think it's Sirenum, but I could be mistaken. So I will leave a link for the store page down in the description again. But I think for a first attempt, this is really well done. Now, the game initially released, as far as I can understand it, in July of 2021 in early access on Steam. And the devs have, again, as far as I know, taken feedback and progressively updated the game to come to a 1.0 release where we are today. To me, that shows dedication. That shows a determination to put out your product, understand that it's going to get criticism, understand that it's going to be torn apart by the general public, but keep working to make it better, which I think is awesome. Now, that being said, I do feel like this game kind of appeals to a very particular subset of people, those being the ones who very much like the colorful anime style, like very much the main character has like pink, white hair, there's red and green hair, there's the rainbow of hair colors throughout our characters seen in the game. Now, unfortunately, the custom artwork for each character, which is actually pretty good to be honest, does not match up with the overworld sprites, so I do believe the sprites were a store asset. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I totally understand why developers do this, but there was that kind of disconnect between what the sprite looked like, and then when I saw the character in the text box, I was like, oh, this is not what I expected. Which is totally fine. Again, indie game, small dev team, presumably very small budget. I'm just proud of them for getting over the finish line at this point. In terms of gameplay, I unfortunately didn't get very far, as I very quickly realized this was not a game for me. I wanted to do the 2 hours, but it was really heavy in terms of all the talking, in terms of all the setup, that felt like it wasn't really taking off. Now, again, I tried to do 2 hours, but I very much felt like this game wasn't for me, and I did not want to put in that amount of time. But according to the Steam page, they have about 14 hours of story. Now, I was about half an hour in, so not very far, and still maybe nearing the edge of the tutorial, not 100% sure. So I would say probably that first 45 minutes to an hour is going to be tutorial, but you start, you meeting your party members, you're kind of getting the feel for how combat's going to go. I have no idea where the story's going to go, but it definitely felt like something was there, and I firmly believe they could squeeze that 14 hours out of the game. Hopefully not with too much padding, because to me 14 hours feels very specific. It doesn't feel like the kind of number you try to pad out to get to 14 hours. It feels like, okay, this is realistically what you can get out of it in terms of fun, which I think is great. 14 hours for $10, not to mention this being the first game from a new studio. I think that's a wonderful achievement. It is hampered a little bit by the fact that these days, most fantasy works are going to feel derivative in some form or fashion because of just how much literature, how much media is already existing in today's society. Like, fantasy stories have been told verbally for thousands of years. We have myths, we have legends about all of these different creatures, all of these different societies that have now been published for over the last, say, few hundred years. You know, first people were writing down individually, then we got the printing press, and now fantasy is just one of the biggest genres to ever exist. So it's really hard to come up with your own story, with your own ideas. And I will say, it felt a little well-worn in terms of the names they were using, in terms of the tropes they were using. Their combat system I didn't get far enough into, but it did seem like there was definitely more complexity in how magic worked, which I thought was cool. But even your main character, his name is Andraste, to me just screamed Dragon Age. Now, I'm sure Andraste has been used in far more than just the Dragon Age series, but that's the first association that popped into my head. And it was unfortunately the same with a lot of the other names, places, and figures mentioned in the little bits of conversation that I engaged with. Now, here's the thing. I have no idea how many of these are going to be original works or original ideas and are just using the names or maybe the baseline idea of other myths or other stories. And that's the problem, is no matter where you go, in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases you're going to find tropes or works that feel not derivative but are using the same ideas or maybe character names or things like that of other fantasy works. And it at least in the tutorial, at least in the beginning, felt like it was a lot of stuff here. Like the fact that they had one character whose dad was an artificer, I was like, okay, I know that because of D&D, but that feels really out of place for the whole setting. It felt kind of weird, not to mention the general appearance of the game felt very off. It felt like magical, felt like a magical city in like the, say, 1700s or 1600s, but then the thing that the characters are wearing in terms of their character cards, their profiles, was very much modern. Or like the fact that the main character, again, Andraste, had in her picture a sword and a gun, which to me was like, wait, what? Why does she have a gun? Where is she getting this gun? So I would have liked, personally, just a little bit more artwork that like changed as the story went on. So like it changed when she got her sword, and then it changed again when she actually got the gun, or else you're giving away what these characters are gonna have, which I don't think is a bad thing. It just felt very disconnected from where I was picking up a spell book and a sword to seeing in her profile, oh, she has a gun. Wait, what? There's guns? Wait, what's going on? Like, it felt very confusing and overwhelming. I will say, though, as someone who writes myself no published works, writing multiple characters, an entire storyline, side quests, and all the other things you would need for an RPG to fill out 14 hours is a lot of work. It is an incredible amount of work. And, there are 80-hour, 90-hour, 200-hour RPGs, but those have a whole team of writers. Those have multiple people coming in, doing their thing, leaving, coming in, doing their thing, leaving. And it's like, it's person after person after person. And I don't know how many people in Sirenum there are in terms of the writing team, especially if this was one person or up to 3 people. That's still a lot of work and a lot of text they have to put in to keep the story going, to keep everything moving at a decent pace. So I don't want to devalue the work they've put in, because they've put in, I'm sure, more work than I can imagine. But we run in again to that problem of it feels similar to something else. And I'm not accusing them of taking from any other lore or any other series or anything like that. The names overlap, some ideas overlap, that's as far as I got. But it didn't feel like it was doing enough to make its own lore, to make its own universe. I think this was a super ambitious project. I think they've done super well, and I genuinely am curious to see where they go in the future with this. But I will say the first attempt is not a hit for me. Like, I don't think it's a bad game. It's just not a game for me. But if you like, shorter little indie RPGs, absolutely check this out. I don't think the studio has put out a bad product by any means, but it will certainly appeal to a very particular audience. Like, even me, if I was 10 years younger, might have liked this a lot more in terms of character visuals, but I've very much grown out of that phase. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think people change, their tastes change, and this is going to be right for someone. Even if it wasn't right for me, that's totally fine. I hope it's right for you. So by all means, check out the devs, wishlist the game, pick it up if you feel like it. I would heavily encourage it. One more time, thank you to Sirenum Studios and Keymailer for giving me a review copy. Does not will not change my opinions on games I cover, but I'm always happy to receive them, to be able to showcase more games to a wider variety of people in hopes that they're going to find one that's right for them. With all that being said, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for being here, for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!